What's up, everybody? So you got a new quad. Maybe you build it, or maybe it's a bind and fly, but it's got a GPS unit on it. You take it out, you plug it in, and you wait, and you wait, and you wait, and you don't get a GPS lock. Maybe, if you're lucky, 10, 15, 20 minutes later, it finally locks. Now, you've heard about cold starts of GPS units, and you know that the very first time in a new location, it can take a really long time to get a GPS lock. Even though the chip that's on the quad maybe says that a cold start should be 30, 40 seconds at the most. But you think, whatever. At least now it's got the information. But the next time you plug it in, it still takes a really, really long time. Maybe not 20 minutes, but 10, 15, whatever. And you're not sure what's going on. Well, today I'm going to help you with that. The, 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 I've seen this issue come up a lot recently. I've seen it mentioned in some videos. In fact, I know Bardwell did one of the videos where he was comparing some of the newer 4-inch long-range quads. And I believe it was the Diatone Roma that he had made a comment about, that it came with a GPS unit installed, but it was disabled out of the box because of reliability issues. Well, this is why, because most of them don't work very well. And actually, that's not actually an accurate statement. The GPS units actually work really, really well. You take one out of a quad, power it by itself, and it comes up and locks, almost instantly. On the other hand, you put it in a quad and all of a sudden things don't work anymore. It does work, but it's not feasible. Nobody's going to go out, get ready to fly a quad, plug it in, and then let it sit there for 20 minutes until it has a GPS lock. And even if it does get a lock, you might have 5 or 6 satellites at the most if you're really lucky on a great day. And you take it up and you fly it around a little bit, and chances are that lock's coming in and out, and you're losing it, and maybe you have 1 satellite or no satellites, and then other times you've got 5, maybe 6 if you're lucky. The reason is that you're not shielding the GPSs, and I'm not sure why this isn't being done. I've got a little bit of RF background, so maybe to me it just seems natural. But anyway, basically to kind of explain things as easily as I can, the GPS unit is a really powerful antenna. It's a very sensitive antenna. And it has to be able to listen to these very weak signals from these satellites that are up in space. On the other hand, you've got all of these electronics in the quad, the flight controller, you've got the ESCs, the motors that are generating noise, you've got the VTX that's kicking out power, you've got, in a crossfire system or some other receiver system, you've got, the transmitter that's sending information, which isn't that big of a deal, but then you've got telemetry data, which is going back to the transmitter. And especially in some of the quads now, your 4K cameras, a GoPro, for example, does a pretty good job of shielding the camera itself, but a lot of the other cameras, particularly the high definition cameras, output a lot of noise themselves. So if you're running like a RunCam hybrid or a Tarsier, something like that, you get a lot of noise from that. All of these things combined make the GPS pretty much useless on most of our quads. However, there is a fix, and it's a fairly simple fix and a pretty simple one to do. And it really comes down to shielding, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about. So now, I have seen some mention in some articles and some online videos about shielding the wires from the GPS or shielding the camera or whatever. And in some cases, basically everything that I've been able to find hasn't really been proper shielding. I've even seen some tests recently. I don't remember where it was or who it was that did it. I apologize. But basically they were using aluminum foil, which is fine. Aluminum foil can act as a shield, but basically they were just putting it around something, and that doesn't work. That's not shielding. So to demonstrate, I've got here just a little BN220 GPS, pretty common unit. A lot of quads are using this, or if you build something up, this might be a unit that you use. The same thing applies whether it's like one of the Maytech units, the what is it, M8Q, I think. Um, any of these type of GPS units. Number one, you've got all this wiring that's coming out of it that is eventually running through your quad and connecting to your flight controller. And all of this wiring is unshielded. Um, like I said, I've seen a lot of things where somebody will take some aluminum foil and wrap around these wires. Or if they isolate it and they figure out that most of the interference that they're getting is coming from, let's say they have a Tarsier camera. I in particular have a 5-inch quad that I have a Tarsier version 2 on. And that camera generates a lot of noise that interferes with GPS. I've seen a couple of tests where again they'll just put some foil, like aluminum foil, and wrap it around the back of the camera. Here I've got, this is some copper tape, and this is actually what we're going to use for shielding. It's not that you can't use aluminum foil, but this stuff is really good, particularly for shielding, for a very important reason. It's very easy to solder to, and we have to be able to solder to this in order to make it an actual shield. I'll explain that in a moment. But anyway, if I take this tape and I just tape this around this wire, I can wrap it up. I can put one layer, I can put 20 layers, I can do whatever, and I may attenuate the signal a little bit, but I'm not going to shield it. It's not going to be shielded. There's one important thing about shielding that you have to understand that I have not seen mentioned anywhere on any online videos, any articles, nothing. And I think it's the reason that everybody is struggling to get these units to work. So let's think of an example for a moment. Think about the coax cable that comes into your house, whether it's for an antenna or a cable connection, whatever. That coaxial cable, the way that it's constructed, there's a center core or center conductor. That's just a piece of copper wire. That's where the signal travels. On the outside of that is a piece of insulation. And then outside of that is typically a braid of wire. That is the shield. When you connect or put a connector on an end of a coaxial cable, that shield, the center conductor doesn't touch anything at all. But that shield is actually in contact with the connector itself. Because when you attach it to, say, your cable box or your TV or whatever, it connects that to ground, and that's the key. It has to be connected to ground in order to be a shield. So first of all, before we get into a little bit more details of exactly how to do this, let's take a look at, we'll go to Betaflight, we'll look at one of my quads, I'll show you how it works in terms of how fast the startup is, even with everything on, and once we finish that, we'll go down to the bench and we'll take a look at exactly how you can get these same results. All right, so let's take a look in Betaflight, or actually more specifically in uCenter. This should be a warm start. It's not going to be a hot start. I'm pretty sure it's been more than 2 hours since I've had this powered up. Again, the number of satellites that are locked are going to be evident, but still, just wanted to make sure you were aware of that. It's not like, just pulled out of the box and hooked up and did a cold start. However, I can tell you that when this GPS first did do a cold start, it only took about maybe 30-40 seconds, something like that, before it had acquired lock and had quite a bit of satellites. So anyway, here we go. First thing I'm going to do is plug in the quad. And you'll get the lovely USB noises. Go to our fly, and we're going to put it into GPS pass-through mode. Alright, now that we have done that, I'm going to run uCenter. Okay, so now in U-Center we can see already, I mean, yeah, I realize that, you know, switching windows around, I made a little cut there, but honestly, it's been a couple of seconds. Um, you can see that already we have, what, I don't even know how many this is, 3, 6, 9, 12, 13, looks like 13 satellites that are locked in. You can see the signal strengths where they are. You know, the signal strength is up there quite a bit. Um, Again, you know, in comparison to without the shielding, I can tell you that even though in this same unit, um, you know, the signal strengths were all very, very low. It took a long time to get locked, probably, you know, 5+ minutes from a warm start, if not more. Um, One of my other quads actually has a Tarsier camera in it. And that particular quad took at least 20-25 minutes before it would ever even get a lock, and that was with like 5 satellites, and 5 satellites, sometimes 6 is the absolute most that I would ever see on that particular quad, until I did the shielding. And once I did the shielding, it comes up in a few seconds, it's locked in, and you know, lots and lots of satellites. So now I'm going to switch back to beta flight. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at beta flight. I'm going to power the quad with my bench power supply. I've got my transmitter powered up. That's going to power everything up, the VTX and the cameras, the HD camera as well. Everything that basically would be ready to go if I was getting ready to fly. So there the quad's powering up. I'm going to go ahead and attach the USB now.
Flight back 2.4 volts.
And here we go. And you can see it already got a GPS lock. And if we look over here, we've got 9 satellites. And again, this is sitting in a porch under a roof. You know, I mean, this is not open sky or ideal positions. I've got, you know, a lot of stuff sitting around, but the data kind of speaks for itself. I mean, you can see how well it's doing, even with all of this stuff powered up. You know. All right, so here again, you can see, you know, how quickly the satellites locked in. Well, in beta flight, you can see how quickly they locked in. You can see how many we've got here that we're locked onto. All right, so here we go. We've got our GPS unit back here. This particular one is the BN880, which has the compass built in. But again, this applies for any of those GPS units. And in this configuration, you can see, you know, I've got my Immortal T here, right directly underneath of the unit. I've got the AXI antenna right here directly above it. My VTX, this is a 1 watt, or goes up to 1 watt, and typically, you know, on a flight I would be running, you know, 600 or 1 watt, or up to 1 watt. And the VTX is sitting directly on top of the cables. The cables from the GPS unit are running directly underneath. So just to give you an idea of what's going on here, if you take a look, basically the plug comes out of the GPS unit, and that's right where the foil starts, the copper foil. It comes down through. Again, you can see that underneath here, you can kind of see where the wires are surrounded by the copper foil, just like we just made. It comes up, and in the case of this particular quad, it comes right up, and you can see there's my negative post on the form one. And because you don't have to do this, but because in this particular case it was going right beside the negative post, I went ahead and just soldered it right to the negative post on the form one as well, along with my capacitor, which is up underneath there, and along with the negative from the battery. Again, you don't have to do that. You can just run a wire to a ground or to your battery. I would say go to your battery post though. Not necessarily direct with the foil, but at least run a wire from the foil to your battery post. In theory, it doesn't make any difference if you just use a ground on like your flight controller. But to me, I'd rather have, you know, any signal that's basically getting grounded out. I would much rather have it just go straight to the battery. All the grounds are connected to that. You know, like I said, it's one of these things where it's not really necessary, but it's just something that I always do. But anyway, then you can see the foil kind of continues up basically till it's just level with the flight controller itself, and then that's where the GPS wires break out and go and connect to the pads on the GP or on the flight controller itself. In this case, I'm using the RunCam hybrid, and you'll notice I don't have any shielding up there. It doesn't make any difference. Didn't need it, didn't require it. The 4K camera in here does generate noise, and just like all the other stuff on here generates noise, but just the shielding of the GPS wires, as you saw from the earlier demonstration there, is more than adequate in this case to keep things quieted down and to make the GPS work 100% reliably. Okay, here we go. First of all, let me apologize. My dog is being a real butthead right now. So if you hear her making a lot of noise, sorry. So here's our GPS unit. What we need to do is we're going to take the wire, we're going to shield it. Now we need to know an approximate length. You can do this several ways. You can measure in the quad or just get, you know, a piece of string or another piece of wire or whatever and kind of run it the way that you're going to run the GPS wiring. You can figure it out that way. You can always, you know, make it a little bit longer than you need, and then once you have it in place, you have to be real careful, but you can take a razor knife. That's what I did with mine. Just kind of take a razor knife and just cut around the foil, just score it a little bit and then peel it off, and it'll peel right to that length. But anyway, we're going to take a piece of our shielding. Let's say you figure out whatever length you want to start with or try. And, you know, for the purposes of this, I'm just going to tear off a little piece. So let's say this is the length that we need to be shielded. All you're going to do, and usually what I do to make this stuff a little bit easier to work with, is I'll start to peel one corner. And just kind of, because this stuff is kind of thin, the backing's, you know, a lot heavier than anything else. If you take it like this, you can kind of lay this down to one side, up as close as you can to the connector, and just kind of press it on there. It doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be great. You know, peel back a little bit more, and do the same thing again. Peel back a little bit more. Same thing, and then for that last little piece, just kind of peel it out and get it stuck. Once you've got it kind of down one side, you can see, I mean, I didn't do a very good job of keeping it centered or even, but that's okay, it doesn't have to be. Again, this is just going to provide our shielding, so it's not really that big of a deal. And usually what I'll do is I'll just kind of fold the end a little bit and then just go ahead and finish rolling it around and seal up the rest of it. You can see I was a little off center on the end here. That's fine, don't worry about it. Just keep on going. Just keep it nice and tight. You don't want it like, you know, gigantic bunched around. So there we go. That's it. We've got it in there. Now you may notice this is obviously a lot more stiff than normal wire, but it will still bend. So, you know, if you want to bend it, you can just kind of, like, let's say this came out of the GPS unit and we wanted to go over towards the side of the quad, you just kind of take it and, you know, form it a little bit and then maybe we were running back down the side of the quad. You know, you can do something like that. Once it's down there, let's say you're coming up here and this is where you're going to the flight controller. So you bend that up, and then this is going to come up to your flight controller, and then, you know, maybe your wires get clipped off here and run to the pads on the flight controller, whatever. Now, like I said, right now, this is not a shield. Will it attenuate a little bit of signal and keep it from, you know, having as much noise? Yes. Will it shield it from the noise? No. This is not a shield. It's only once we ground this, okay? So you want to make sure, like, if this is your flight controller, again, in this particular setup, in the one that I was showing you, you know, I had actually kind of done a little bit of a turn here as it came up and pushed it over just a little bit like that and pushed it right against the lug, and then used the soldering iron and a little bit of solder to solder it right to the negative post on the battery that was coming off the battery. You know, you don't have to do that. You can take another piece of wire and just solder to this somewhere and run it to a ground, or run it to that you know, the negative post on your ESC or your PDB if you're using a PDB. However you want to do it, doesn't really matter. Most important thing is just make sure that this gets grounded. So as you can tell, shielding these cables makes all the difference in the world. You know, typically what I've found is in most quads, if I just shield the wires going to the GPS itself, that's all it needs. That's everything, and it works beautifully. What you just saw there was in a quad that only has the wires to the GPS shielded. If you have something like, for example, the Tarsier camera, I think I mentioned it before, is really bad about generating noise. It generates a ton of noise. And because of that, what you might find is if you have some piece of equipment that is just really noisy like that, you may find that you have to shield the cables on that as well. So hopefully this helps some of you guys out. Hopefully this will, you know, make a difference. And if you found this useful, please do share it. Please subscribe, you know, give it a like, leave a comment, you know, try to get this information out there, really, because like I said, I seem to see a lot of people who really struggle, and some people that are trying to understand what's going on, and, you know, some people that understand that it is from interference, but I guess they don't really know how to solve that interference issue, or not in the proper way. This is the proper way. Anyway, hope you enjoyed. Take care, everyone. Have a great one.